Hi, Danny Fleming.
We swapped the order this time. I'm Marcus Collins from MA Properties.
We're here for the 2022 Lexington Market Review, where we're going to go into detail about what happened in our market in 2022. And it's quite a story.
Yeah.
We'll get a little further on. But why do we do these? Well, it's easy to get information and data today, but it's much harder to make sense of it and use it to your advantage. And it's why we take the time to explain, why we're serious about learning and obsessing and everything like this about the local markets. Because you've probably heard lots and lots of doom and gloom headlines nationally about what happened with real estate last year. Real estate's local. You gotta concentrate on the local markets. And where can you find this information? I mean, apart from listening to us. We also have it on our website. All of the information that you'll be seeing is available on the website, maproperties.com. Scroll down on the homepage to statistics, and you've got all of this sorts of information. Now, you're seeing 6 data points there. There's probably 18.
Yeah, probably 3 times that, I would think.
Yeah, different data points. And you'll find Lexington in there, but you'll also find about 50 more towns that you can go and drill down and find out what's going on. If you've lived in Lexington or you live in Lexington, you are probably familiar with getting the Market Review booklet in the mail. It is still coming. It is, I've got to stop saying
It's still coming. It is still coming.
It's still coming.
What do you mean, like they're on bated breath waiting for it?
No, it's still coming.
I'm still writing
doing this live stream in advance to give you the information early. But the Market Review should be hitting your mailbox late January, early February. So, but with talking it through, it's probably a lot easier to figure out what's going on in the market rather than reading it goes into detail. But anyway, what's our agenda for tonight? We're going to cover single family homes, then the luxury market, then the new construction market, then condominiums, what the analysis is, and the 2023 predictions, which, okay, it's going to be interesting.
We're not going to agree. I don't know who's going first, though.
But what we could say is you could characterize this last year as a tale of 2 halves. The first half of the year was very, very different to the last half of the year. And we'll go and drill down
That'll be the second half of the year as well.
What did I say?
The last half of the year.
Yeah, okay, the last half of the year. I'm thinking,
There's only 2. There's only 2, like the first and the second.
All right, I'm handing over.
Control, I love control.
No.
There you go.
But I'm going to be piping
Yeah.
I'm going to be piping in.
I've tried to do this without my wife doing that, and it doesn't work. Okay, so should we talk about single family first of all, should we? Why not? Let's talk about What? You can say something.
Are we live?
Yeah,
there we are. We are live.
So.
Good. There we are. Okay.
We're live.
Yes.
Right. Single family. So first off, let's take a look at home sales. Pretty dramatic this, specifically the effect of COVID in here. So 2020, 2021, a high number of home sales driven almost exclusively by changing housing demands, people moving to who knows where. We had Portugal, migration. We had San Diego, we had all over the place.
Mass migration across the country.
Right. Now we get to 2021 and that number's dropped right back to, I knew I was going to make that mistake.
Yeah, I'll always correct him. Don't you worry about that.
2022, we are down to the low numbers that we saw in 2018 and 2019. Yeah. So that's a relatively big drop. Actually, it's about a 17% drop in home sales. That's not exclusively a 17% drop in home listings, though. There are a large number of homes on the market over the end of the year, more than we normally see. And we'll talk a little more about that a little bit later on. But as you can see, a relatively steep drop in the number of home sales. This is the kind of cumulative graph showing you the same thing. The numbers are different because it looks at under agreement date as opposed to sale date. So it's a little bit different in terms of that. So, but yeah, definitely far fewer sales this year than we saw in prior years, and back to the normal market, if you will, of 2019.
And that's very, very different depending on what town you're in. There are some towns that see the same sales happening this year as what happened last year.
Yep.
You can see Lexington has a dramatic reduction in home sales. So every town's different.
Yep, real estate's local, that's for sure. So let's take a look at some metrics to kind of get a sense of what's going on with the market. So the first one we look at is days on the market, pretty straightforward. How long does the home take before it goes under agreement? Dropped, from the numbers high clearly in the early 2014, 15, dropped down to about 30 or 40, and that's where we were in the majority of the market pre-COVID. Now it's dropped down even further than we saw during COVID, down to 24 days. Which is a very low number. You can get lower than that. Arlington, for example, is in the teens, but 24 is still a very low number in terms of the days on the market.
Especially when you look at the distribution of sales price in Lexington compared to Arlington.
True.
We do have homes on the market over $4 million. Well, they take longer to sell. So this is the average days on the market.
Right, for all price points.
Yeah.
So the other metric we look at is the ratio of the sale price to the list price. So imagine a home comes on the market for 1.2 million, sells for 1.2 million. That's 100% sale price to list price ratio. So let's take a look at that for the last decade. As you can see, 2021 and 2022 had very elevated numbers. We were around about 100, 101%, 99 over the last decade or so, once we came out of the crash, as it were. But we jumped dramatically in both 2021 and 2022. But
yes, you've been hearing all those doom and gloom headlines.
Right.
Tale of two halves.
That's an interesting metric. It's a high metric, certainly far higher than we've seen before. But where's the downturn in the housing market here? You clearly can't see it in that data. So let's take this ratio and let's do it by month as opposed to the average for the whole of the year. And that's what you see here. And as you can see, not much happened in January, very few homes sell in January, but it rose up to 116%.
And we should point out, before we go too much further and people have a chance to have a look at this graph, there's about a 2-month lag with those closed sales. So what you're seeing, say for instance in August, probably went under agreement sometime in June, early July. If you're seeing something in May, it probably went under agreement in the March and April timeframe. So factor those, skew it 2 months either side.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
When you look
this
at
is
that.
Yeah. So if the market declined in August, actually the market had declined 6 to 8 weeks prior to that, because we're just seeing the sale date as opposed to the under agreement date, which is when the price is fixed.
Yeah.
But you can see the second half of the year, perhaps a little more than the half of the year, had much, much lower numbers in comparison to the first half of the year. And so now we're beginning to see the downturn in the market show up in the information.
Don't say downturn in the market.
Okay.
A little bit of a depression.
Okay.
Depression.
A little bit of a depression in the market in the second half of the year. So let's look at prices and see quite what happened with prices. So this is the average price in Lexington. As you can see, it rose about 3%, 2021 to 2022. So about what we've seen historically. We saw a much higher rise last year from between 2020 and 2021. But the norm is around about 3, 4, perhaps 5% some years. But we're back to about 3% this year. But again, let's take a look at the difference between the first half and the second half of the year. So what I've done here is I've broken out the average price first half versus second half. As you can see, the average price in the first half of the year rose about 7% from the numbers in 2021. For the second half of this year, it's about 0.3% higher than we saw in 2021. Now the average for the year is about 3%. But 7% for the first half of the year, buoyant market, low interest rates, the story that we've heard before. Second half of the year, along comes what do you want me to call it?
depressing situation.
Okay, the depressing situation. And house prices essentially are the same as 2021. Now remember, it's not all gloom and doom here. 2021 was was elevated in comparison to 2020.
Yeah,
so we saw a big rise in 2021.
Yeah.
So we're just back to those 2021 numbers. We're not back to numbers prior to that.
Yeah.
So, but that's kind of where we are. We can clearly see that second half of the year nowhere near as strong as the first half of the year in terms of the average price. So that's that kind of tale of two halves, if you will. For those of you who think we should study medians instead of averages, I don't want to have that debate right now, but there we go. That's there's the median. It didn't rise very much, unsurprisingly, with only a 3% rise in average. Our median didn't rise very much by about $40,000, so basically flat, essentially. So not that high an increase, and certainly nowhere near the increase we've seen in 2020 to 2021. So we're getting back to fair to say, a normal market, if you will, where the numbers we're talking about are about the numbers of increases about what we would ordinarily talk about.
But what's important to point out here is that if you were just paying attention to the national gloom and doom headlines, you'd be thinking the market is crashing, the market is crashing, the market is crashing. It might be in other towns or in other cities around the country. We don't know. But here, even though there has been a bit of a depression in the last 6 months of 2022, we still appreciated 3%, which is normal prior to the COVID years. You know, the normal 3 to 4 to 5%. Well, we still did normal, and that was over and on top of an amazing 2021 where the price appreciation, I think I'm just trying to remember, it was 14% or something. Okay. I mean, so we're okay. We're okay.
Luxury. So, given that the average price in Lexington has got to such a high number, we used to define luxury as over 2 million. This year we decided that didn't really make any sense. The average is median's 1.6, average is higher. Let's reset our luxury benchmark or definition to 2.5 million. So we've increased it from 2 to 2.5 million this year, and so the analysis that you'll see now is to do with a minimum price of 2.5 million. Here's the last decade's worth of data. As you can see, there was almost nothing until 2019, and then it rose in 2020, and it's kept going at those elevated numbers in 2021 and 2022. I should explain the blue in this graph is existing homes and the green is new construction. I'll have more to talk about that in a moment. But very, very strong. I mean, remember we saw about a 17% decrease in home sales in general across the market. We're actually seeing more 2.5 and above home sales in 2022 versus 2021. So it's clearly not mirroring the market in general. It's actually out beating the market in terms of number of home sales. So strong market. Average days on the market, give you a sense of that, want to see how strong it is. It's been declining, as you can see, 105, 78, 80, and all the way down to 40 days. It's higher than the market in general, no surprise, more expensive homes. They do in general take longer to sell, but it's still at a very low number. And certainly 40 was about where the market was in general in 2016, 17, 18, for example, just to put that metric in context. List price to sell price ratio, bouncing around 100%. Clearly not as strong as the market in general, but bouncing around about that kind of 100%. Again, no surprise because of the price point. Interesting to look at the price distribution. This is the old metric, if you will, in terms of luxury, in that I go 2 to 2.5, 2.5 to 3, and then over 3. If you compare 2021 with 2022, you can see that the big decrease has been in the 2 to 2.5 million. The 2.5 and above has in fact outstripped what we saw in 2021. So that decrease in home sales that we talked about before, that 17% reduction, you can see it clearly here in the price band below 2.2 to 2.5 million. Actually, we're not seeing that in the 2.5 and above, which is positive. There's a lot of strength in that 2.5 and above housing market here in Lexington. So that's what that says. New construction, let's take a quick look at that. It's a big part of the market here in Lexington. No surprise, the story of teardowns and the like is a common one in Lexington. So where are we with new construction? Interestingly, a lot less new construction sold this year than did in prior years. I have a little more to say about that in a minute. You can see we're down to 41 homes, new construction homes sold this year, which is less than we've seen previously in certainly the last 2 years. What's interesting about this is that there's a lot of new construction actually on the market today that didn't sell in 2021. And what's interesting about that...
2022.
22. No, 21.
No, 2022.
There's a lot more homes that didn't sell in 2022 still on the market in 2023.
Yes. See, I was right.
I knew I was
Did you hear that?
I knew I was going to get it wrong, at least twice anyway. And what that means is it's different for new construction than existing homes, because an existing home seller can decide, you know what, the market, my house isn't selling. I'm going to take it off the market and I'm going to put it back on the market in 1 to 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. New construction, the developers can't do that. They have to sell. They need to sell that home to buy another one and so on.
They're carrying costs. It just doesn't make sense.
They just can't afford to carry those homes. And so what we may well see, the bolus of new construction homes on the market beginning to kind of have an impact on house prices, because developers will be forced, if they don't sell in 2023, to reduce those prices, and that in turn will begin to have an impact on existing home prices. So we're going to watch that one carefully in the next couple of months and see what happens with the new construction homes. But it's possible, if they don't sell, that they're going to have a negative impact on home sales of existing homes, just because the developers have to sell, homeowners don't necessarily have to sell. So that's one to keep an eye on over the next couple of months, and we'll be tracking that one as we kind of move forward. In terms of the distribution, we've got less this year than last year, but again, strong in those higher price points. The reduction in sales has really been in the 1.5 to 2 and 2 to 2.5. You can also see in the last 4 years a shift to higher price points for new construction too, of course. There's nothing in the up to 1.5 million anymore, and there's only 3 in the 1.5 to 2, whereas back in 2019 there were 22. So there's clearly been a shift to a higher price point. The developers have moved the needle to a higher price point, but we're not seeing as many sales this year in those below 2.5 million than we saw in 2021. So that's kind of interesting to see. The higher price points are performing rather well, the lower price points not so well. Now, lots of discussion around teardowns in terms of should you or should you not sell to a developer. And I thought this set of information here is kind of valuable. You can see from this that the price of new construction has grown quite rapidly, actually. They've shifted to a much higher price point. But the question I asked myself was, are we seeing that same shift in prices for the off-market teardowns the developers buy? You would think we would, but do we? So this graph, there's about 3 bits of information in this one. The orange bars are the number of teardowns. You can see that's dropped dramatically in 2022.
But a lot more actually came on the market on MLS and were sold to builders via an MLS sale. Right.
This is just those homes that don't come on the market and get sold directly to developers. Mm-hmm. The blue line is the average new construction price. And not surprisingly, that's, as we just showed from the distribution graph, that's risen dramatically. In the last couple of years, we've gone from 2.1 million to approaching 3 million. That's a rapid rise. But what's really interesting is we've not seen the same rise in the house prices, the prices the developers are paying for teardowns. That's still around about $800,000. When we talk about teardowns, we talk about the rule of thirds in general. A third for the acquisition, buying the teardown, a third for build, and a third for profit. That's kind of the heuristic that we've always used. But as you can see here, that's really no longer the case. It's not quite 25%, but it's approaching, the mid-20s. The amount of money that the developers are paying for the off-market teardowns is way less than the third that they used to pay. You can see that 2014, 15, 16. They're kind of tracking each other. But now, as we move into 2021 and 2022, new construction home prices have risen dramatically as a consequence of the strength of the luxury market here in Lexington. But we're really not seeing that being seen in the off-market teardown prices, which are basically have remained static since 2019. So, moral of that story?
Bring your house on the market, even if you think it's a teardown, because they're selling for...
Right, that's for sure.
The builders compete for them. The builders do compete for them, and the more offers you have on your home, even if they're multiple offers from builders, the higher price you'll get. So that's just a given.
But I thought that graph was kind of useful. When I did it, I was a little surprised when I saw the information for 2021, and even more surprised when we kind of now put the 2022 data in there in terms of what's happening with those off-market teardowns. So let's turn our attention to condominiums. Not a big part of the market here in Lexington, but there are a number of condo developments, Pfeiffer, Drummer Boy, Pop Potter Pond, and so on, and some new ones too, of course. The new ones that went in on Emerson Gardens last year, the end of last year. So sales of condominiums, they fluctuate quite wildly, actually. To some extent, a consequence of new construction. The green here is new construction. The blue is existing condominiums. And so there is a lot of variability. As you can see, there aren't that many sales. There were only, 670 sales? 65 sales this year. Yeah. Comparison to the single family market, it's quite small. But there it is. Let's look at that ratio again, to get a sense of the strength of the market. And this is the sale price to list price ratio. As you can see, it was potentially or ostensibly a rather strong market in 2022, but guess what? Let's break it out by year.
Tale of two halves.
There we go. There's a little bit of variability here because there aren't that many condominium sales. So you have to kind of look at the data and go, well, for example, in October, there were actually very few condominium sales, and it just took one or two to sell higher, will kind of skew that ratio. So that's why we see the variability there. If you look at other towns, Arlington, for example, we see a dramatic drop in the condominium sale price to list price ratio in the second half of the year. And because there are a lot more condominium sales, about 230 from recollection in Arlington versus 70, 65.
And typically
here.
Because of that, if it's a condo, you're typically talking about a first-time home buyer, right. And they're the ones that are impacted most by rising mortgage interest rates because they've saved and saved and saved to get their 10% down payment or their 20% down payment. So they're borrowing a lot of money to buy the home. So any percentage increase in the mortgage interest rate is severely going to impact them. So that's why we saw such a dramatic change in Arlington, and you can see such a dramatic change in Lexington too.
Right, and the mortgage interest rate, of course, the increase in the mortgage interest rates doubles down on an increase in prices too. So if you've seen house price appreciation, that inevitably raises your mortgage repayments. Then you factor in a 2 or 3% rise in your mortgage interest rates, and lo and behold, they kind of double down on each other. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, if you will, in terms of the impact that mortgage interest rates and rising appreciation, which we've seen in the market, is having.
But it's interesting to look at the May data, 113%. This is something that we talk about all the time, about one of the best times to sell is very early in the season. So the 113% were homes that came on the market and sold sometime in March. The April of 108%, they probably came on the market in February. So it's very much characterized by come on early, and you can sort of see the impact with that. And actually, we didn't look at the single families, but the single families, you find exactly the same thing. The earlier you come on the market, in a normal year,
You
the
should,
higher the demand is.
you should also factor in what you said previously, or reiterate what you said previously, is that a home that sells in May has gone under agreement and therefore was probably listed late March, perhaps early April, 6 to 8 weeks prior to that. So that peak of 113 was not a home listed in May. It was actually sold in May, which means it was listed in March.
I actually said
you
that.
said that, okay. I was worrying about
He wasn't paying attention.
Right.
I love that. Keep going, dear.
Okay, we'll talk about something else. No, we'll talk about average prices. So here's the average prices in...
But you said it much better than I did.
Thank you. Of course. Why wouldn't I? Here's the average prices of condominiums in Lexington, 954. The challenge with this data is it factors in new construction and existing homes. And in general, new construction condominiums sell for far more than existing homes. So let's back out new construction from this data and let's see what the existing condominiums, the Potter Ponds and so on, what their price appreciation or their average price.
And their average sale prices.
Right. Interestingly, if I can use my magic sticky here. Here we go. We actually saw a decrease in average prices 2018, 19 and 20. So a decrease. The reason for that was that if you think about the average price in Arlington and Lexington, for example, they're about the same. But most of the condominiums in Lexington are in developments, Potter Pond, Pfeiffer, and so on. The condominium condo fees are about double in Lexington what they would be in Arlington, where predominantly they are 2 and 3 family homes. And so you're paying about the same price. You were getting a similar school system for the elementary and the middle school, but you're paying half the condominium fee in Arlington versus Lexington. And that was some of the decline that we saw up to that 2020. It rose quite rapidly in 2021, and it's risen again slightly in 2022.
Yeah.
But let's, as we did with single family, let's break out 2022 based on the excluding new construction, what we saw in terms of prices. And so here, what you see in the two bars at the end is the average price in the first half of the year and the average price in the second half of the year. And what you can see there is, give or take, about a 10% decline in prices between the first half of the year and the second half of the year. So for the year in general, it's about 6%, but about an 11% rise in the first half. That was about a 9% decline in the second half, meaning we're up about 2%. And in general, for the year, we're at about 6%.
But what's important to note and really sort of point out is 2021 was a banner year for condos.
Yep.
And this year, in 2022, we're still 6% higher than that. That's higher than, it's not the prices depreciating, it's just that 2021 had such an incredible increase in the sale price, the average sale price. So even though these doom and gloom headlines, we're still doing okay. We're still doing okay. We need to reiterate that. We're still doing okay. It's not all, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. We're still doing okay.
Right. But think now, as we think about, the wider perspective in 2023, the second half of the year is what we should look at in terms of what do we anticipate the next 12, 24 months to bring. So with that, let's take a look at kind of the wider perspective. So we've given these presentations many times. Maybe you've listened many times. We've shown this graph before, or this slide before, which talks about COVID, essentially. What impact did COVID have on the housing market? Clearly changing housing demands, and that drove the market for 2020 and 2021. Now we come into 2022, and definitely as we come into 2023, this is having a less and less impact, if any impact at all.
Although I went to see someone today.
Nothing to do with COVID, though.
I know, it's nothing to do with COVID. I went to see someone today, and they were getting out of the state because of Proposition 1. And I thought, oh, interesting. I wonder how much more we're going to see of that since Proposition 1 passed. Yep, indeed. So, that was it. It's not changing it's not because of COVID, it's because of the tax policy in the state of Massachusetts. So,
This becomes less, if any, of a factor at all, really. And we're back to business as usual. And what that means is we're back to the changing demographics that's driving the market. You've probably seen this graph before. It's the population of the United States broken out by age group. The top yellow bar are the baby boomers, those children born after World War II, now getting to retirement and therefore downsizing. The lower bar are the millennials, the first-time home buyers. They're looking to jump into the market. And so the market in general, moving forward now, is going to be driven by what it was being driven by in 2019 and 2018, 2017. The actual demographic shifts, which is not as dramatic. They're there, but there's nowhere near as dramatic as what we saw in 2020 and 2021. So
COVID. Yep.
back to normal, if you will, in terms of what's driving the market. The big difference here, of course, this year versus prior years has been mortgage interest rates. And if I can show you there, that rise there is what we are seeing in that second half of the year. The much lower price appreciation, condominiums and single families in the second half of the year, a consequence of those rising interest rates. Buyers have done a few things. They've shifted to ARMs, but they're still being impacted specifically because we saw a large increase in prices in 2021, and that's doubled down, if you will. Mortgage interest rates double down on that and make it even more of an impact.
And when you think about it, I mean, for the last decade, we've had such low interest rates that people haven't even had to think about ARMs. They've not been part of their vocabulary or anything like this. And now all of a sudden, ARMs become a major player. And yet some folks early on in this mortgage increase forgot completely about the fact that there was an option that you could get an adjustable rate mortgage and then refinance in 4 years' time or 5 years' time when the rates are back down to, their normal levels, which we hope that will happen.
Let the ARM adjust, actually, at the end of the day. There's an adjustable rate, which means it can adjust up and down. Yep. And if we look at the projections, take these with something of a pinch of salt. I took these out all the way to 2024. That was kind of brave of the Mortgage Banker Association to do that, but I thought, hey, if you guys are going to go for it, I'm going to put it on a graph. But it looks like, I mean, even if they're not accurate, plus or minus 0.5% or so, does look like we are going to see over the course of this year and next year a declining interest rate for mortgages, and that kind of will alleviate some of the pressure that we see right now. That first-time home buyers, especially, but not just first-time home buyers, are beginning to see in the market. So that's the kind of biggie. So to touch on to this kind of housing bubble that was all the talk and is still to some extent all the talk of the national press, you can definitely see a change in that second half of the year versus the first half of the year. But in terms of condominiums, for example, we just reverted to the relatively high prices we saw in 2021. We didn't see a dramatic decline, even if we just look at the second half of the year as in of itself. It's returning to the similar numbers that we saw in 2021, which were much higher than we saw in 2020. And so it's clear that in the markets that we've looked at anyway, that we're not seeing a housing bubble. We're seeing something of a correction back to normal.
Normal. That's the thing. We're going back to normal appreciation rates instead of the insanity that's been happening.
Indeed.
In the last couple of years, because really some of the prices that were being paid were insane.
Yep. There's no question. There was no rationale to it, and I think. Now, there will still be buyers who will pay way more than they should because they're not getting the right advice from their buyer's agent. But I think in general, what we'll see is certainly a kind of hold on a minute, do I really need to pay 110% of the asking price here, or actually am I closer to 100%? I think that's kind of where we are with that exuberance in the market. It looks like it's behind us in general.
Getting a bit more sanity.
The aggregation on aggregate.
Because the more insanity there is in the market, the more chance that you are going into a housing bubble and prices will correct.
Correct.
A sane market,
Yep.
more
Absolutely.
sanity is a stable market.
Right, which is what we want, actually. We don't want those high price increases. Some people do. If you're a seller, maybe you do. But overall, in the market in general, that's not what we want.
It's
because
not healthy.
Eventually, if it just doesn't make any sense, it's going to come back down. What's interesting to look at, though, is, we saw, around about a 3% rise in prices in terms of the market in single family. But we saw a 17% drop in the number of home sales. So even though we saw a 3% increase with a dramatic reduction in the number of home sales, if we'd been at the same heady numbers we'd been at in 2021, that maybe not look quite as rosy a picture.
Might be stable.
No, it won't be stable. No, we're going to disagree on this one, I think. But we're not. We are everything. Both the number of home sales, price appreciation is returning to those numbers that we're more used to. COVID's behind us, certainly in terms of the housing market, and we're now back to those kind of normal market, which is where we'd hoped we would have been.
And more anecdotally, the buyers that we work with in our team, they're still looking. They want to buy. They're still looking. I think part of this is people are starting to get over the fear of what might, rising mortgage interest rates were doing, because they didn't know whether they were going to start plateauing or just keep on increasing. There was no real, and they're now talking about inflation starting to become under control. So now, okay, are they going to keep rising keep on doing the increase? Well, maybe not. So buyers' confidence is starting to come back a little bit based on what we're hearing from buyers in our...
Oh, sorry, I have to go backwards here. So you believe this... Well, I think what Danny just said is you believe this graph.
I believe that the buyer confidence is starting to come back. Now,
because they're beginning to look at this graph, they're beginning to think this is going to happen.
Yeah,
I think that's what's happening.
Happening.
If an organisation like the NBA starts saying that we think mortgage interest rates are going to decline, by the middle of this year, we're going to be at 5.5% from the heady 6.7 we were, in the last quarter of 2022. Then that does bring some buyer confidence back in.
Because remember, when you look at that, you look at the third quarter and the fourth quarter, it went from 5.6 to 6.7 in the matter of a couple of months.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it did.
That's when the buyers were,
yep.
Oh, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know when we're going to be able to buy a home and when we have to lock in an interest rate. Can we actually afford it? Because if it's going to continue going up, what if it gets to 8% and we're still committed to buy this home and got 5% on the line and, all of this as a down payment, as a deposit. So now that we're starting to get a little bit more stability with mortgage interest rates and they are starting to sort of trickle down, I think the market is going to be okay this year. What do you think, Marcus? I think it's going... I'm positive, but I think what's going to happen is not have the crazy price appreciation that we've seen in the last couple of years. We're going to have a depression of price appreciation. No, it's
a decrease. How about a decrease? Okay. Decrease in acceleration, which is a deceleration. There we go.
There's going to be a deceleration of appreciation, not of home prices. Lexington's got too many strong fundamentals. The fantastic school system, the close proximity to Boston, the community dynamics. People want this. They want this. They want this. So I don't think they're going to change their mind about wanting this. I think we're just not going to have as huge a price appreciation that we've seen in the last few years, which is a good thing. What do you think?
What do I think?
What do you think, dear?
Right, so buyers, first of all. There's certainly some reticence in the market today for buyers with the high mortgage interest rates. As those interest rates begin to ease, and they are already beginning to ease, that will bring the buyers back into the market. Now, is that in January and February, or is that in April and May? Hard to tell. But I think the buyers will come back into the market, not with the same
gusto.
Yeah, gusto, and certainly with the same notion that in order to buy in Lexington, I need to pay 120% over the asking price. That won't be happening. Interest rates are simply too high for many of them to afford to do that. So the buyers will come back into the market. Question is when will their confidence return? Early in 2023, or perhaps over the course of the next, Q2, if you will. I think that's kind of a question for us, and we're going to be looking at how many people come to open houses and those metrics to get a sense of when the buyer confidence returns. But I think it's pretty clear it will return, in 2023. The only question is when. Q1, Q2. I'm not sure.
I think it's Q1 still. I think it's Q1, but maybe the latter part of Q1. We have a few houses to bring on the market this year that we know about already.
Right.
And I think normally we would bring them on early in the spring market, sometimes late January, early February. There's a couple of houses that have come on the market now. They're sitting. So it's really a case of watching and seeing, ready, to respond.
I think the new construction ones are the key ones to look at. There's a lot on the market today, far more than we would ordinarily expect. As I said before, they have to sell. They can't just come off the market, put them back on in 2 years' time, stay in their house and come back on the market. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to those new construction. Do they sell? Do we see price reductions coming in on those in order for them to sell? So that's, I think, the first couple of months that we're going to be kind of looking at that. Now, in terms of the sellers, that's kind of the buyer's perspective. In terms of the seller's perspective, it is a changing market. There's no question about that. It's back to 2018, 2019, and so on. And what's clear, and if you think back to the 2018 and 2019, thinking back, I didn't show the graph here, but it's in the market review. It's the number of homes that sell below and the number of homes that sell above the asking price. In 2017, 18, 19, if you have the historical copies of the market review, you can go take a look. We were about 50-50 in Lexington. About 50% sold below the asking price and about 50% sold at or above the asking price. Now this year, it was 75-25 from memory. I think next year, or this year, excuse me, so 2022 it was this, 2023, all the indications are that we're back to normal. The number of home sales are back to normal. We are getting back to normal. And what that means is sellers in this market need to be focused on the fundamentals.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They need to be focused on those fundamentals. You can't just put a home on the market at some crazy price and expect it to sell. Those days are gone. You missed the boat with that one. They are gone. So sellers in this market need to start focusing on creating the product that today's buyers want, marketing it well, pricing it correctly,
realistically,
doing all of that, and the homes undoubtedly will sell.
And that's what was happening. I mean, you saw the data that we had for the last half of 2022. We were bringing homes on the market and we were getting competing offers and selling over the asking price because we were giving the right advice to our sellers all the way along about how the presentation is so important, the marketing is so important, and the realistic pricing is so important. So the homes that got impacted badly were the ones where they didn't focus on that. So
you said the same as me, but you said it far better.
Yes, I did. I was ready to say it. I was ready. And you started stealing my thunder, so I thought, I'm going to tell it anyway.
So I think that's the seller story. I mean, the heady days of 130% over asking price just because are gone. That's for sure. The second half of 2022 showed us that. And so it really is a return to the fundamentals, to essentially compete with other sellers to catch those buyers in the market and create that. I need to have this house. Even though it's, a little bit of a push given mortgage interest rates look like they're going to decline and so on. That's the fun. That's where we are in that market.
And if you want to know how to do those things, go onto our website and sign up to some of our Sellers Masterclasses. Oh,
Right,
I've got a plug in.
There we go. Go for it. I'll give
Our
you.
Sellers Masterclasses. We're doing different topics every month, and they're all there. And come and join in. And all of it's all about education. As you can tell, we like talking about real estate. So we'll talk your ear off if you give us the opportunity. We'll talk your ear off.
Right,
So-
about the stats or about getting your home on the market. I mean, all of these kind of
or
things.
just
So
education in general.
that's true.
How does-
Education
how
in
does-
general. Yep.
How does seasonality, all of those sorts of things. Anyway,
So that's my predictions, our predictions. Different for sellers and buyers, clearly. But yeah, that's where we are. And so the first 2
we'll
months
see
of
whether
this
we're
year,
right.
I do it every year. So hey, nobody's turned around and said you were wrong when you said that. So,
And we should point out that we're going to be doing market updates, or I think you're going to be doing market updates every month moving forward.
I am.
So we haven't come up with the dates. Is it the first Monday of every month? All of that sort of stuff.
It'll be
worked
very
that out
early in
yet.
the month. Yeah.
Yeah.
As soon as I build the stats every month. And I have that first or the second of the month, usually the first. And so we're going to do it pretty soon after that. And some of these things we're going to be looking at, how many homes are sitting on the market? What's happening to that new construction? So the next couple of months will be pivotal, I think, really in terms of what do we see in the 2023 market in general. I think we're pretty close with our predictions, but we'll add a little more clarity to that and a bit more accuracy, if you will, as we get 1 to 2 months more.
So we should just point out that Lexington did okay, and we're still doing okay. That's all we can ask for.
That's true. And it would be nice to get back to a housing market that wasn't, I don't really understand why you paid that much money for that house. That's what we'd like to get away from. And I think those days are, as I say, those days are gone. So,
anyway, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate the opportunity to fill you in on what's going on. This will all be in the market review booklet that comes out in a couple
end
of
of the
weeks'
month, early February,
time.
and we'll see how long the printer takes to print it. They're usually pretty fast. And now the post is really fast, so that's great. It used to take a while for it to get, but now the post is really fast. But yeah, hopefully we'll get that in mailboxes by the end of the month. Hopefully you got the Lexington sales booklet that we sent out. That arrived in mailboxes on Saturday. That tells you all of the home sales in Lexington. And so that's useful. But the market review, which has got lots of this information, comes out end of the month. Fingers crossed.
And look, if we can help you answer any questions you have, then please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We love talking this, so
We do.
we'd love to chat with you.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.